Jeff Clark, he is a senior fellow at the Center for Renewing America, and he knows this case quite well. The case against Trump, the latest indictment filed by special counsel Jack Smith. Jeff, I've been trying to understand this story. It's very complex. Can you just break it down for dummies like me?
Well, Glenn, thanks for having me. And, you're definitely underestimating yourself, Glenn, but hopefully I can help the audience to understand the case. So, look, obviously this case was filed a while back, and it had, resulted in several important decisions, first of the district court and then in the D.C. Circuit, holding that President Trump was not immune. They tried to laugh that argument out of the lower courts, especially with this ridiculous SEAL Team 6 hypothetical, the idea that President Trump could order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his political rivals. And so the argument goes, because that would not make any sense, therefore he can't have any form of immunity. And I always thought that hypothetical was totally ridiculous. When the case eventually reached the Supreme Court in a case called Trump v. United States, which was decided by the Supreme Court 6-3, most of it on July 1st of this year.
Right.
They gave that argument short shrift, too, and they held, consistent with the fact that every other branch of government has some form of immunity, that the President of the United States, and it wasn't just applied to Donald Trump, it was applied to all presidents of the United States, have to have, a set of immunities. And the immunities they decided that he had were basically in a trichotomy. So the first tier is that when the president exercises his core executive powers, the things that are at the heart of being president, he is absolutely immune for those, full stop. Then second, for anything else that he does, which is not within his core powers, so that would include things like speaking, using the president's bully pulpit, he is immune out to the outer boundaries of his office, as long as it has a nexus to his official duties, which a lot of things do, and that there he has presumptive immunity. And in order to overcome it, you'd have to show that it would really make no impingement or inroads into the executive power, to be able to pierce that immunity. So that's also a very strong form of immunity.
But that would be something like he's, saying, WWE is real, and somebody sues him and says it's not real. It has nothing to do with the presidency, right?
Exactly, right. And so, it certainly, to my mind, let's take the speech that he gave, outside the White House on the ellipse on January 6th. He was clearly talking about matters of public concern, which the president can express himself on. And I think that is presumptively immune. And I think to tell a president that he could not set out his views about an election would be an inroads into the presidency, and therefore he would also be immune for that. So the last category in the trichotomy is a category for which a president would not be immune, Glenn. That's the category of an unofficial act, an act in a private capacity. And so after the Supreme Court's decision on July 1st, it kind of goes down each step. It steps down to the Court of Appeals level, and they remanded back to the district court to Judge Chutkan, and then Judge Chutkan started to set proceedings. More on that in a minute. And then what's ultimately come once she now has jurisdiction back of the case is that Jack Smith was off to the side working with an entirely different grand jury, and he got this superseding indictment that came out yesterday. And in a phrase, what that indictment is, new indictment, meet the old indictment, it's just the same as that old indictment. He's just reformulated it to try to make it consistent with and fit everything into the third box, the box of everything President Trump did that he had indicted for the first time is actually a set of private acts as opposed to a set of official acts. And therefore, Jack Smith argues he's not immune.
So are they doing this to smear him yet again so late in the campaign? Or is this a plan just in case he wins? They think this will keep him out of office?
I think, Glenn, that they're doing it for all of those reasons, right? They absolutely want to block him any way they can. So this is election interference. there's no way that you should be issuing a new indictment like this using a new grand jury this close to a major presidential election, especially one
Correct.
of these states. And then, look, and that it also shows me that this was being concealed. So what happens is that the court was told, because it was ready to go and start trying to set deadlines and the like to try to march back toward a trial, and Jack Smith made a filing in the last couple of weeks that said, oh, no, hold on, slow down, I need more time. We're doing consultations inside the Justice Department. Well, I'm sure they were doing consultations inside the Justice Department, but that's not the real reason. It's now clear that the real reason is that he was actually in secret grand jury proceedings getting this superseding indictment. And the media, right, the media has been all over watching the D.C. courthouse. I mean, back in the real height of this a year ago, no one could walk into the courthouse, even if it was for an entirely different reason, and not have the media report XYZ, notable person went in, they must be going to the grand jury, or there was, speculation amundo. But for this proceeding, somehow, it surprised everyone. All of the mainstream media purported to say, well, Jack Smith's just consulting inside the Justice Department. I think that was essentially running a cover story for the fact that they were conveniently not purporting not to watch the courthouse, because they would have seen the prosecutors regularly going to the grand jury to get this new indictment, and yet there was entire radio silence on that until the surprise of yesterday.
So what is supposedly new in this one that changes the ground?
It's not. It's essentially just a reformulation, right? So the original indictment started out by saying, Donald Trump, President of the United States, from these dates to candidate Trump. So everything's been reframed in the light of trying to fit it into the third box of being a private, unofficial act. Yeah, and otherwise it's the same. It's the same 4 counts. There are even, what particularly remarkable to me, Glenn, is not just that they have the trying to repackage the allegations, right, to go against Trump in his private capacity, but the fact that 2 of the allegations relate to this statute, 18 U.S.C. 1512, and that statute went to the Supreme Court also this past term, involving the January 6thers, and the Supreme Court decided that 1512C2, about obstruction of an official proceeding, which I'm sure you and many of your listeners would have heard of, a statute that really they stretched to try to apply to January 6th, even though it didn't. The Supreme Court held that it did not apply to the January 6thers, and it remanded. So, Jack Smith is never say die. He's still using 1512. Many commentators thought that after the Supreme Court's Fisher decision, that's the one about 1512C2, that he would drop the 1512 counts and he would just go with a conspiracy count, 2 conspiracy counts. There's one, 18 U.S.C. 371, conspiracy to defraud the U.S., and then the second conspiracy count is a conspiracy against civil rights. But no, he's using exactly the same 4 counts that he used before. That's why I say, the new indictment is really the same as the old indictment.
I have to tell you, I don't think the Rosenbergs went through this kind of trial and tribulation that Donald Trump. I've never seen anybody treated like they treat Donald Trump. Never. What the courts have done to him, what the prosecutors have done to him in these cherry-picked courthouses and districts is absolutely obscene. And I'd love to hear your point of view, Jeff. I think they're going to put him in jail in September.
Well, I'm actually, Glenn, making preparations to go up there to be in the Judge Merchan's court in Manhattan on September 18th if the sentencing goes forward. Look, 2 days before that time, on September 16th, Judge Merchan is supposed to issue his decision about whether the Supreme Court's immunity decision, Trump v. U.S., that I've been talking about, whether that essentially requires a new trial to be granted. And I don't see how it couldn't possibly, you could come to any other conclusion than the fact that it requires a new trial, because the President Trump is immune for his official acts, and there's even, in addition to the 3 tiers of immunity I described to you, the Supreme Court created a new exclusionary rule and said that internal deliberations inside the executive branch are protected and they cannot be presented in court as evidence against the president. And so the Alvin Bragg prosecution in front of Judge Merchan, it presented precisely such prohibited evidence. It had Hope Hicks in the Oval Office talking to the president and testifying about various things. The jury heard that. And you can't unring that bell. They produced a verdict based on hearing that evidence. Alvin Bragg's trying to argue, it's all harmless error, right? We would have gotten that even if we hadn't presented that evidence. Well, who knows? No one knows that, and I don't believe it. And so he needs a new trial. So I predict, sadly, for the same reasons you say, that the lawfare is just so intense and unprecedented against President Trump, and it really is a dagger at the heart of the republic, that I bet, Judge Merchan is going to go ahead and deny the, immunity-based motion for a new trial, and then he's going to, do the sentencing. And I actually would not be surprised if he sentenced President Trump to prison. And maybe he tries to, soften it a little bit at the edges by saying the sentence wouldn't begin to run until after the election or something like that. Or if you really wanted to go full bore, right, he could say, no, you're remanded into custody immediately, or you are remanded to home confinement immediately. He has a lot of different options.
Oh my gosh!
And
I got to tell you, I think the American people will lose their mind, both Republican and Democrat, and especially I think independents. I think there's a lot of people who are sick of this, and they will see this is a banana republic.
I agree. It's already gotten to a banana republic level in terms of the level of lawfare directed at President Trump, at myself, at Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, at all of my co-defendants down in Georgia with Fani Willis. Now they have a new case, out in Arizona, which they're trying to press on. It's relentless. It really is something that is trying to criminalize politics and criminalize the ordinary operations of law enforcement, and pretend that because Donald Trump was the chief executive of the United States, that he's some, unprecedented threat that requires a level of treatment that no one's ever gotten before in the history of our country. Just take Glenn, the Mar-a-Lago raid, right? What did they do with Vice President Pence and President Biden? They negotiated an agreement to go and search through their homes, right? But did President Trump get that treatment? No. He got a jackbooted raid with armed agents who wouldn't even show the president's lawyer, Christina Bobb, at the time, the warrant initially, until she had to basically, pry it out of them.
From the Center for Renewing America, he's a senior fellow there. Also, former U.S. DOJ Assistant Attorney General Jeff Clark is with us. So if they put him in jail, can a president be in jail? If let's say he wins the election, but he's in jail, what happens?
So there are two periods, right? One would be a period prior to inauguration. There, to answer your question right before the break, the Secret Service would still protect him. And, indeed, Alvin Bragg had been talking to the New York jail system about trying to make accommodations for that. And then in the period after he's inaugurated, then I think all of the, any kind of imprisonment would have to be ended or suspended. It would be what lawyers call preempted by the Constitution. Since he would be the duly elected and inaugurated president of the United States, he can't be kept from exercising those functions by a state conviction.
That is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I don't think our founders I don't think they ever saw something like this happening. I mean, our checks and balances are so far out of whack, and the administrative state is so strong now that, almost anything can happen. It is really crazy. Jeff, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just going to say, look, you're absolutely right. The Republic is hanging by a thread at this point, and hopefully Judge Merchan will come to his senses. And, I think the Supreme Court's always in the background to, make this all come out right like they did in the Trump immunity case on July 1st.
Jeff Clark, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You can follow him on Twitter at Jeff Clark US. At Jeff Clark US. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. I mean, can you imagine, Stu?
Yeah. I was thinking about that as you're playing out those situations. What if they, putting him in jail would send a message, and I think, as you pointed out, I think would backfire on them. Could you see them do house arrest? So he can't go and campaign anywhere. He can't do any rallies. They put an ankle bracelet on him. I don't know. That one I could see. I could also see the jail thing though. I especially if they're losing. I think the more dire they feel their situation is, the more likely that happens, that he goes to prison, because they will see this as, well, I mean, we've got this other card to play. Why not give it a shot? We're losing right now. I don't think they feel like they're in that situation. I feel like they think they're winning, and why would they shake it up?
I have to tell you, though, I think if Donald Trump was under house arrest and he couldn't leave his house, first of all, he could do video from his house, I'm sure. And there'd be people like me. I mean, I'd be willing to take a hiatus and go campaign for the man if he couldn't campaign himself. And not because, well, he's a Republican, because this is an American that has been wronged. And we all have to stand up for it. I mean, they are out of control.
That's going to be fascinating.
Can you imagine if they win? Oh my gosh. You imagine how much trouble we're in if they win, Stu? I mean, everything we've ever talked about is happening right now. Whew. As Jeff just said, a republic hangs by a thread. Who's going to rush in and save it? Well, I will tell you, it will only be good and godly people, because it's got to be people of merit that are trying to find favor in the eyes of God and say, we will be a fruitful nation and we will bear good fruit. Otherwise, he will curse us and we will wither on the vine quickly.